Good morning. Today is November the 20th of the year 2023. Oh, there it is. There's that Celsius. We have many Celsius today. Um, this is going to kill us one day.
We're all going to die one day.
No, but Celsius is expediting the process.
I've actually heard this is good for you.
From the unnamed reports on the side of the can, right?
Yeah, 7 essential vitamins.
That's 7 more than I had before.
How do you know which vitamins they are, though? Because then...
That's right there. Vitamin C, vitamin B6, B12, and some others.
Interesting. Pastor Eugene, today is the 17th, and darn it, I gave it away. It's not the 17th, it's the 20th, it's a Monday.
Dang, the secret's out.
Darn it. And this week is Thanksgiving week. 1, 2, 3, 3 more days until Thanksgiving. And I was thinking maybe we could give thanks a little bit. But before we do that, normally I go cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I love pecan pie from Costco. But this year, I'm changing my lifestyle a little bit. There's a pie company in Warwick called Noble Pies, also in Terrytown. Place is phenomenal. Like,
isn't Warwick like an hour and a half away?
Yeah, no. Don't give away my address, man. But I'm saying like, there's one in Terrytown, which is not that far from Bergen County, which is where we reside, all of us. Noble Pies, please check them out. Not sponsored, by the way.
Yeah, why are you giving away free advertisement?
No, but Noble Pies, by the time you listen to this podcast, it might even be too late, to be honest, but very delicious. And I was thinking today, maybe we'll talk about our favorite Thanksgiving foods because we are upon the week of Thanksgiving. So, Pastor Eugene, what is your favorite Thanksgiving food? Number one.
I don't know.
Do you eat like the traditional turkey and maize?
Sometimes. Is that what you look forward to? Turkey?
No, like 0%. I actually don't even like turkey that much.
I don't think anyone likes turkey.
Yeah, I feel like it's just in the name of tradition that we do this.
Well, I mean, we deep fry turkey now. I bet that's pretty good.
Does the fat seep into the inside of the skin?
You would imagine, yes.
Can't be eating that. Wait, no one has like a favorite?
I like corn. I don't know. Even when I get Chipotle, I love corn. So Thanksgiving corn is pretty
weird,
good.
Dude. But yeah, I love pies. Anyway, I was also thinking maybe we could think of one thing that we could be thankful for. Pastor Eugene, how about that one?
What?
One thing that we're thankful for this year. Should we do a shallow one and then a deep one?
I do enjoy Celsius.
Would that be the shallow or the deep one?
How many do you think we drank this year?
Dude, I don't want to count. It has definitely shortened my life. But today, we are talking about accountability. How can we keep each other accountable? What even is accountability? How do we shy away from or stray away from the incorrect way of holding someone accountable? These are all things that we'll be discussing this morning on the Dear Church podcast. You are listening to, on Thanksgiving week, the DCP. Welcome to the Dear Church podcast, where we exist to fill your ears and your minds with the study of God to see the world as disciples of Christ. My name is Sam Yang.
I'm Jun Suk.
I'm Eugene Kim.
And today, again, Thanksgiving week, today we will be talking about biblical accountability. And interestingly enough, our current events will be on accountability as well. More specifically, accountability of the U.S. in the Middle East. But before we get there, I think we...
That's such a huge jump.
way, it's the same word, accountability. And actually, our Q&A is interestingly enough about the age of accountability, which I thought was interesting. So all revolving around this term accountability. But what is biblical accountability? Where do we see it in the Bible? And how do we practice biblical accountability in the church today?
Accountability in general is something that the Bible continues to exhort, disciples, believers of God to do. I don't think it uses the word accountable, but it does use words like stir one another up, encourage one another, exhortation, all these other things. So I think we kind of summed it up to mean accountable. Now we've gone to a place in our culture where we have things like accountability partners or accountability groups. And this is not just in the church, but even secular groups have that stuff. And so there's like support groups, which are technically accountability groups, right? It's so you don't go off the deep end after a traumatic event. So you'll have groups like that. But I think it all stems from this biblical notion of, standing beside one another, mourning with those who mourn, rejoicing with those who rejoice. But I think for our culture, it's especially for those who mourn. We stand alongside them. Just like Job's 3 friends would come. And once they saw what happened to Job, the first thing they did was weep. They wept with Job. I think that's something that is necessary, and it edifies the soul.
So I wanted to bring up 2 verses. First is Proverbs 27:17. Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. Hebrews 10:24-25. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. So we know that as Christians, as brothers, as sisters, we are to support, encourage, exhort, admonish one another. We are to hold each other accountable. And like you said, it's almost like a support group where we help each other not go off the deep end. But so I guess accountability in the sense of how we would understand it today. How can we do this? So how do we keep each other accountable? How do we do this biblically? How do we do this correctly? Because there's so many ways that we can think of that has been done incorrectly. How do we correctly hold someone accountable as an accountability partner, let's say?
Yeah, I think there are some obvious ones that people miss. Just because you have an accountability partner doesn't mean that you're okay. I think the whole church has been called to keep each other accountable. And so one of the things that I don't like about the language accountability partner or accountability groups, and I would say this is, a detraction from that kind of thinking, is that we think that once we have it, we're complete. Now that you have an accountability partner, you're good to go. Or, that's kind of the whole entire dimension of what accountability means. But that's not actually true. In the church, when we're supposed to keep each other accountable, what you see a vast array of people with different life stages from different places, just keeping you accountable. So an older person keeping a younger person accountable is completely different from a younger person being accountable to another younger person. Take, for example, Rehoboam, who decided to only be accountable or keep that accountability group because it from his peers. And so what he effectively did was split the kingdom because he didn't listen to he didn't listen to the older people. But that's what we need. We need a whole array of people being accountable to us. And that happens in the church. And that's why it's a wonderful thing where we start off with the family. You have brothers and sisters. You have your mother and father. But it goes beyond that. When you go inside the church, you have a whole array of people with different life stages, like I said, keeping you accountable. And I think that's what we need to understand. If you feel like, I want some accountability, then I think what a lot of people really want is someone to tell them yes and no about the minutia of their lives. Should I go to this party? Should I not go to the party? If I go to the party, if I drank like 4 beers instead of 6, I just need someone to keep me accountable. And I think that misses the point of what accountability is. Accountability is about garnering wisdom. It is about protection. It is about, throwing up fences here and there, making sure that you don't go to places where you can't keep self-control or where you'll be tempted beyond your, abilities, and having someone tell you that. But it's more than that, is my point. It's all these things, including gaining wisdom, including knowing not just the 2 feet that's in front of you, but the 20 feet and the 200 feet and the mile that's in front of you. And that happens when you have, once again, an array of people speaking into your life, looking at you, praying for you. And that's what we see in Hebrews 10:25, right? Not neglecting to meet one another, as some are in the habit of doing. But what you do is when you come together, you stir each. That means you stir everyone up, in the way you can. And it can be in a simple thing like, hey, how are you? How are you doing? And someone saying that to you from a different life stage, from a different vantage point, that might not be as close to you as maybe you are with other people, has, they have different impacts on your life. And that's what I hope that people will recognize when they think about accountability. Don't just think about accountability partner. Think about accountability as a whole. And you look at David's life, he didn't have accountability as a whole from anywhere when, he decided to send all of his people off into war. And he stayed behind in the palace, and then he saw Bathsheba.
He's being lazy. Lazy, man.
I don't know. I think what he did was he set himself up for temptation. Yeah.
I think you bring up a good point of going to others for wisdom, especially those who are older. I guess, especially now that in our culture, in our milieu, if you will, people are trying to teach the elders, right? That was the whole thing during the BLM movement, the height of the BLM movement in the past couple of years. That was the biggest thing, right? Teach your elders how to not be racist. Teach your elders the truth. And I remember it was really funny. They used to have posts that would teach their parents in their native language. So there were posts about in Korean how to teach your parents, to not be racist in Korean. It was just
they had words like microaggressions, and you got to tell them what a microaggression is.
And then that translations in Korean that you could read out to them so that they would understand.
And so if you have like friends that come by and your parents are trying to speak English and say things like, hey, you guys, you go like, oh, that's a flag. You can't say you guys here. What if there are people who didn't identify as guys?
Right.
As a microaggression. And so you would see those posts. It was somewhat ridiculous.
I think one of the wisdoms, one thing that we need wisdom in is understanding and ascertaining who we are to go to for wisdom. And I think oftentimes what I see is people going to people that know they'll agree with them. People going to people that know that they'll agree with them. Does that make sense? People going to people. People going to people.
Yeah, just to reinforce their own biases and views.
Right. And so I guess my question is then, how can we have wisdom in knowing who to go to for wisdom? How can we have wisdom in knowing who is trustworthy? How do we go about this? Can you just help us practically, think through some of these things?
Well, I think because we are people that have been trained and taught to seek safe spaces, we may not be very attuned to deal with adversity. And so there is a safe place for you to actually, increase in that adversity quotient. And that is in a healthy environment in the home and the church. There will be people who will disagree with you on some things, who might be flat out wrong too, but you'll have to know how to talk with them and deal with them. I think it happened a while ago, but it really, really exploded. I think around 2016 or something, when they had posts like, this Thanksgiving, are you going to eat, your Thanksgiving dinner with someone who, doesn't agree with you politically? Like, what if they voted for the wrong guy? Will you eat with them?
Mm.
And I was thinking about stuff like this. Like, how is that even a question? Does that mean that you are no longer my brother or sister or your uncle, cousin, aunt,
Yeah.
just because they voted a certain way? But you can't, especially if the other person voted for a Nazi. If they voted for Hitler, like literally Hitler, if you voted literally for Hitler, you can't eat dinner with them, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so we were actually taught that, how can you share the same space with someone who makes you feel unsafe? And so, the way we deal with adversity has been drastically lowered, where now the only response to someone who gives you, now no one says the word microaggression. This was just a few years ago when microaggression was a big deal. Now it's just violence. Everything is violence,
Yeah.
So if you say, hey, guys, to a bunch of people that might not identify as guy or male, that's not just a microaggression. Now it's called violence. And so you did me violence by calling or misgendering me or whatever the nonsense term is out now. And because of that, we don't know how to deal with anybody that disagrees. Everybody needs to agree. And that's why there's so much violence on, let's say, from the rioting that most recently happened for pro-Palestinians, which is so fascinating to me too. Why do pro-Palestinians get to be violent? And then if you're pro-Jew, can you be violent? It's sort of amazing. So I think as a rule of thumb, you can see that the violent side is probably not going to be the right side or the wise side. You definitely don't want to be violent. This is something that MLK Jr. also emphasized. Don't be violent. Once you're violent, you lose your ground. You lost the argument. And so if someone commits violence against you, however, then you can show them the depravity of their beliefs. You know what I mean? So that's what they even thought. In the 1940s and whatnot and going on. And so what we don't know now is really how to deal with things that we might not necessarily agree with, or you would think, oh, this is actually not a healthy view to have. And so instead of, arguing with someone on the merits of the debate or whatever it's going out there, it's just, how could you hurt my feelings? And, I don't feel good. I feel violated. I feel like violence has been done upon me. And the answer is no. No violence has been done. It's just because someone says something, I mean, it could have been unwise. And maybe it was a bad thing that they said. But I think there's a clear difference between a physical act of violence and someone saying words.
So, I mean, to your point, we shouldn't go out of our way to look for somebody that we know would disagree with us, right? So what are like the parameters, I guess? Because I think what you would say is you would look for someone that is wise, that you would look for someone that is mature in the faith, someone that you seek to emulate, someone that you look up to in the faith.
Yeah, usually someone that's older will help.
Right. So how do we go about doing that? Because another thing is people sometimes would go to those that may agree with them, or people might go to other people that are in the same similar situation, or people that may have an expertise in one thing or another. So where do we kind of, like, how do we prioritize our parameters when we decide on who to go to for advice, who to go to for wisdom, for prayer, etc.?
I think there is definitely a spiritual gift of wisdom, just like Timothy was exhorted not to let anyone look down on him because he was young. But the reason for the exhortation is because there was conventional wisdom that because Timothy is young, he doesn't have that. And so he had the special helping of the Holy Spirit to gain wisdom. And that's what Paul was exhorting Timothy to do. And now we take that verse to mean like anybody young, you have something to offer. Let them hear your voice and yada, yada, yada. I think you missed the point. The point was Timothy was called by God. He was a son, a spiritual son of the Apostle Paul. He had much to offer because of what he was given. It's not just because you're young. Youth doesn't make you wise. In fact, the definition of youth is you're stupid. You always think you got to experience things to figure things out. And the definition of old is you have experienced it and you realize that you were stupid. And so I'd rather listen to someone who's older, who actually has that point of view, than someone who's younger, who thinks that they have something to offer strictly because they thought about it for like 5 minutes or because they're young. Now that I said that, but I would like to add that there can be older people who are less wise than you. It would not be, for the majority of the part. I don't think so. I think there's a reason why, if you look at just sheer statistics, when pastors really come into their place, if you look at, I don't know, if you want to look at, let's say, successful pastors who had successful ministries by whatever parameter that you want to gauge that in, whether it's number or, education, whatnot. I saw the age range that pastors kind of come into their place, and it was their late 40s, early 50s.
I still have time.
Like, if you look at people that you know of, these huge evangelical leaders, they start out when they're young, most of them, but they really got into their stride in their late 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And that goes to show you something. Just because you're young, don't let them look down on you. Take that verse. Well, why weren't they successful then? They weren't successful because they needed to go through some things. You needed to be tested. You needed to have these experiences in your life. It's stupid youth that tells you, I don't need experience. I can just do it. I don't need experience. I should just get paid this much. I deserve it. I'm entitled to it. That's stupidity. That's foolishness. And so when I say older, I think for the most part, we can see that there's wisdom that older people have gotten. And that's why the word for elder and the word for older is so similar, even in the Greek. And so, can there be older people that are not as wise? Oh, absolutely. I think there are older people than you, Sam, that may not be as wise as you. However, wisdom should dictate that there is something still to learn from them, maybe even in their unwiseness. Okay? And so I still like to listen to older people. And if they're wrong, why are they wrong? What measure have I used to say that they were wrong? Is it the Bible, or is it my own measure? Because they may see something that I have not seen. And so, I think there's a difference between someone who looks at a painting for 5 minutes and someone who looks at the painting for 5 years. And in that sense, there is something to be garnered over time. And I respect that. Is that the only measure though? No, absolutely not. But I think that's a large measure for, that we have lost in our day and age, where we don't respect older anymore. We don't respect elder anymore. We respect newer, younger, fresher. And we kind of make fun of the old. Saying, you're old, you have nothing to offer to society. The older is what built the society that you're walking on. And if you can't respect that, you will get zero wisdom from not just their accomplishments, but even from their mistakes. And so to learn from that, I think would be a wise track to be on.
Is there ever a wrong reason to look for accountability?
Yeah, like you said, if you want to just be reinforced, someone just to rubber stamp yes to whatever you want to do anyway, is the whole thing. Like, I remember watching a video just a year ago where, it was a video aimed at kids. This grown adult man who, dressed effeminately would say, if your parents don't accept you, I'll be your parent. Come to me.
What show is this?
It's not a show.
Oh.
It's a TikTok video that was viral. And the whole point about that is, you don't have someone that agrees with you, especially on this huge decision that you believe that it's right. No one in your life believes that it's right. Then it's not your job to question if you're right. You're obviously right because you need to express yourself with whatever expression that is coming out from you, because that's authentic. I will embrace that and I will encourage that expression was, the whole point of the video. And, for the most part, parents saw this and said, that was sick. This individual is sick, which is good. That's good. But you would imagine still, too, that swaths of youth who watch TikTok would have fallen prey to this obvious predator, this terrible person who was sending out videos like this. Leave your parents. Come to me, that kind of thing. Watch my videos and then feel good about yourself. So that is one way we can say accountability, quote unquote, accountability is not real accountability, because what you're looking for are partners who will just reinforce your bad ideas. No one's going to push up against it. And that's that's what we call the echo chamber. You just go into like these social media enclaves of your own, of your own ideas, just echoing the things that you want to be said and that you want to hear. That's a bad thing. And so if you find an accountability group and partner that just mainly just, says you can do it, you do you, make sure you take care of yourself and just kind of elevates the self, I think that's something to watch out for, because the church never does that. The church never says, you do you, make sure you take care of yourself. The Bible always says die to yourself. And that's not a message you hear from the world. Are you dying to yourself? Are you taking up the cross and following Jesus? Are you presenting yourself and offering up yourself as a living sacrifice to God, which is pleasing to Him? Are you doing these things? Or do you just want to do what you want to do? And if that's the case, then perhaps what's more applicable to you is the Romans verse, 24 to 27, where God will give you up.
I'm wondering, this is a little off topic, but do you think there has been a single good thing that's come out of TikTok? A single good thing?
There's some good cooking videos.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some like really nice of substance, no, but like you said, shallow level entertainment wise. I found out that, Costco has a bunch of deals depending on their pricing models or stickers that they put on, which is all garbage, by the way. It's not true.
Yeah.
But then, I found those enjoyable, and I would look at some of the pricing models that they would have at Costco because of the video. But, it turned out not to be true. It's fine though. And how to cook some stuff, I found a bunch of cooking stuff that I saw on TikTok or was shared via TikTok about how to make steaks, which is not true either. But it was a nice, like, innovative way to cook steak. But yeah, classic way is good. You want to sear both sides, salt and pepper, maybe some thyme, put some butter in, and then you're good.
Wasn't there one with the Easy Mac powder?
Yeah, I tried
you could
that.
Cook steak with it.
Was it whatever?
I tried the Easy Mac powder. I tried the whole milk powder. I tried the air fryer method. I tried them all. Let me tell you, the sear is the best. What you do is either you do it on a grill or you do it on, a carbon steel pan or an iron skillet. You do it on one of those. Do the classic method. It's fine. Sous vide is okay too, which is, I think, what you like.
No.
No.
Open flame.
Yeah. Anyway, but I would say TikTok has been kept shallow for our young people, and they like, oh, I learned so much from TikTok. So TikTok is the one that's teaching our kids a lot of stuff now.
Yeah.
Which is, pretty amazing.
Like, so I know that that's a bad, I guess, way of judging something. Because, I could say that about anything, like about Instagram. I can say that about candy, like, has any good come from this? But I just think
Celsius.
Celsius. I don't know. Celsius. I really don't know. But I think, like you said, if that's the main way that kids are being educated today and that's what they're taking back and that's what is shaping their worldview, then that's a tough one for me. It's a little tough.
Well, I don't know if you have, unless you started early. If you have teenagers now, I don't know if you could get them off of TikTok. If you have, email us at podcast@cgsnj.org. Tell us what you did. We'd love to take a listen. Besides just cutting them off and having them hate you and then secretly watching it on the side and then buying burner phones and doing TikTok through the burner
phones, burner smartphones.
Yeah.
That's real?
That's real.
Kids buy burner phones?
Sounds expensive.
It sounds like a movie.
No.
Like when the CIA, you get a burner phone.
No, you could easily get one. I'm not going to say how to get them, but you could easily do it, okay?
Wow.
That's my point. And then you just pay the monthly dues for the internet access or
Interesting.
just do it when you're on Wi-Fi, whatever.
Oh.
And so you could get a cheap phone, just do Wi-Fi. Or if you need a SIM card, then you could get that put in for you by these like track phones. Look, I said I wouldn't say it, but I just said how to do it.
Because you need that TikTok hit. That's what you need, huh?
Yeah, but it's fine. I'm just saying there's a way to do it. Just like earlier, a few years ago, you talked about like the fake Instagram accounts.
Who's you? Me?
Yeah.
The Finstas? No, Finstas are the Rinstas.
Yeah.
Yeah. People really talk getting their feelings on their Finsta.
Yeah. So what,
no, for real.
I feel obligated to say this, but kids share their, real Instas and their quote unquote Finstas with their parents, but they have a true Finsta.
Oh yeah.
On the side, which they don't. Oh, here's my personal account, and here's my account on this, this activity I love doing.
Yeah.
And so, here's that secondary account, mom and dad. So they're like, oh, he shared or she shared everything with me. No, they have Finstas.
I don't know how I'm going to deal with Adeline. She may have an email. That's
Don't
it.
you have a Finsta?
Oh,
you can
no.
shoot him a follow at Bad Vegan Man.
No, please. You can't reveal me. You can't reveal me to the people. Vegans follow me on that thing. But moving on, I guess, in this topic of accountability. So the way that you're kind of explaining accountability right now, you're kind of making it seem like accountability and discipleship go hand in hand. Is that the case?
Yeah, I don't think you can separate the Christian life from basic Christian accountability. Let's go back to Cain, where Cain's main thing, his response to God in defiance was, "Am I my brother's keeper?" What a bold thing to say to the Lord when he asked him where Abel was. Am I my brother's keeper? And I think that's something that we can think about. Let us sit. If you have a brother and you don't keep accountable to that brother, how far are you away from Cain? And so I do think there is a level of accountability that we are responsible for everyone whom we call brothers and sisters. At least pray for them. Even those that are across the world, we should be praying for them. We see that in the Westminster Larger Catechism that was just said yesterday in our church. But we are to pray for the saints, the brothers and sisters we have across the world. Not only the government leaders, but all of them.
Sorry, you finished mid Celsius sip for me, so I had to chug it down real quick. So then this may go in the wisdom route, if you will. Should accountability partners or those that you seek accountability with only be of the same gender?
No, obviously not. But for certain things, it should be the same gender, obviously. Like, you're not going to share some sexual temptations with the opposite sex.
My
this is
goodness.
exactly what...
That's rough.
No. This is actually what happened with was Billy Graham's grandson.
What?
Grandson-in-law, right?
Yeah.
He was a big evil leader. He was
Wait, what?
rising up in the ranks. And just gonna go find out because he's a producer. Anyway, his wife cheated on him, and he decided to have some accountability with another friend, but happened to be a woman,
Oh,
and then
no.
he cheated on her.
Oh, no.
He had relations with this other woman.
Oh.
And then later on, it was found out that they were both having relations with a bunch of people.
Oh no.
Yeah, you just can't do it. People think, Christians are snobs and just, what his name was?
Tullian Chivigian.
Yeah. But people think, yeah, we're just being prudes. Actually, we're trying to be holy. And we see that the opposite side is devastation. You don't even know who he is now, but he was rising up and he was writing articles for like TGC and everything. And so there it is. And then a bunch of people, like well-known evangelical leaders came and said, I want to put him into restoration, blah, blah, blah. And they gave up on him. And their statements were like, I don't want to talk about it. And the other pastors like, yeah, he's not repentant. We're not doing this. And so you're so far gone. You don't know how to keep boundaries. You don't have self-control. Basically, you don't have the fruit of the Spirit. That means you're not a Christian. And so I think it goes without saying that there are some things that should only be for trusted brothers if you're a brother, or trusted sisters if you're a sister. And then there are things that you should, have other people accountable beyond gender, right? And so you have a mom and dad. You're not only going to tell things to your dad, Sam. That's kind of ridiculous. Your mom has an incredibly important a role to play in your life. But then again, there are some things that only you and your dad would talk about, so to speak.
So, I mean, I guess my question is more beyond the immediate family, but where, I guess, could you give an example of how a male would confide or have accountability with a female that's not his wife? Like, I guess I'm curious.
Yeah, I wouldn't do one-on-one ever.
Mm-hmm.
Even on a pastoral level. So if you're a pastor listening, I would say the counseling needs to be, if you're doing a one-on-one counseling, it needs to be in a public space or, someplace where people are present. It doesn't matter. You could say like, I have no attraction to this woman, whatever. That's just garbage. That's not the point. The point isn't whether you have a try. It's weird if you did have a try.
Yeah, it's weird.
Let me do this. Yeah, it's just, that's not the point. That's beside the point. The point is you want to set up an example for people to follow. And that's what pastors do. You want to keep your, your schedule transparent to the people around you. I, for one, if I were to tell you about the counseling sessions I have, I don't not do one-on-ones with women, but I'll do it with either my wife's express knowledge or she's there in the room. And so I had, a woman in the church actually come over to our house multiple times. And then my wife would sit in with me. But if it was maybe something incredibly private, she would be in the other room. But that was, those are cases far and few in between the vast majority of the ones that I do. And so there are instances where maybe you could take that to account, but I would say because of the danger, the implicit danger behind it, if you never did it, that's totally fine too. If you're a pastor, it's like, I just can't do it. That's totally fine. I understand that too. And I would never do, let's say, an intimate meal, perhaps. Perhaps those are things that I have gone as I have aged, gone away from. And even with counseling stuff, even when I was in youth group, because, youth, you would think they're just kids, but even youth, I now, think that there are like boundaries that you need to set. Amongst the youth pastors, I would say it's never closed door. It's always open.
Yeah.
People will say, can I close this door? And I would say, no, you leave the door open. And what if people eavesdrop? Then why are they eavesdropping? I'll yell at them.
Yeah.
But we never do a closed door. And so those are things that we even did in youth group just to make sure that we have that accountability. But non-pastoral stuff, non-counseling stuff, I would just say never.
Never.
Just don't do the one-on-ones. It's just not a good idea.
Yeah.
Unless, you are courting this person, then it is a one-on-one. You can't court someone not one-on-one, perhaps. But unless you're like my dad would say, just go out with a bunch of people. Why do you have to do one-on-one? It's like, Dad, that's not dating though.
Yeah.
And so my dad was more on the conservative side. And my mom was not. And so, she would say, you should date a lot of people and just to, just kind of get a feel for what dating is like. And so you're not so awkward.
Yeah.
My dad would say, nah, just go out with a bunch of people. I was like, Dad, I already do that. It's like, yeah, what more do you need? But I saw the wisdom in both is my point. Even though those two pieces of advice may have seemed to contradict each other, I saw the wisdom in both pieces of advice. And I think that's the point. You want to garner the wisdom of all the advice that the people that love you, that are older than you, that are more aged, right?
Aged.
Would
Like
have for you.
cheese.
I think we just say aged for cheese, but aged is for people. It's fine though.
Really?
Yeah.
What about aged milk?
Nah. It's like learned. You don't say learned. You say learned. Yeah, the people are learned.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I am.
Okay. Anyway, going back to the original point, that's why I say watch out. But then the world will make fun of you. The world will ridicule you, mock you. They did that for our former Vice President Mike Pence when he said he doesn't have dinner with the opposite sex. They just laughed at him. So-called Christians like Stephen Colbert would laugh at him for having this, and then they would make fun of Mike Pence for calling his wife mother, because that's weird and creepy. And I remember a lot of Christians would come up to me and say, yeah, that's weird and creepy, isn't it? And I would say, maybe not from his vantage point, because she is the mother of his children. And that is the primary,
Roll.
that is the most elevated role
Yeah.
that he sees for his wife. So you say mother, that kind of thing. Because it is the most wonderful role for his wife that he
Yeah.
thought of. And I think, yes, I agree. That's what Adam named Eve, because the most wonderful role for Eve was she is the mother of all that are living.
Yeah.
And these days we tend not to see it that way for whatever reason. But Eve was Eve because she's a mother. This is the same thing. Adam called Eve mother, and so did Mike Pence. Anyway, I'm not rooting for Mike Pence or anything. I think he dropped out already. But
He did.
the point is, we make fun of Christian values in this society. And so you will be made fun of, let's say, if you had that role. If you took on that mantle of saying, I want to keep holy, I want to set boundaries. And if it needs to be adjusted, it needs to be adjusted. But it needs to be informed by the word. And so, the word informs us. So if any adjustment comes, it's by the word, not by the world. And so I would say with what we know in our culture today, for the most part, I don't think one-on-ones with the opposite sex is ever a good idea, ever. Not even long drives. No long, prolonged period of stay with the opposite sex is a good idea because of the rampant promiscuity that is pervasive in our society.
Yeah.
Why do you think you are immune to that? Isn't that arrogance? Why do you think you're, exempt from what the world is falling to? I think it's pure arrogance. I think that's pride. And when brothers and sisters have done that in our church, we've actually approached them. Why did you do this?
Like,
This
I'm
is not
above
wise.
this sin. Like that type of mentality.
Why
right?
did you do this? Even as I didn't sin. It's like, yeah, but what possessed you to put yourself in that position?
Yeah.
And they've come back to us and saying, you're right. That was an unwise thing, because it is unwise. But the world will laugh at you, and they will think that you're a prude. Why does the world laugh? It's because promiscuity is elevated, not mother. It's promiscuity. That's why mother is not elevated. Mother is actually frowned down upon. Don't look down on me being a mother, birthing kids is not what identifies me. Then what is it? You making widgets at a factory? You doing a 9 to 5? That's what identifies you? You being under another boss? That's what identifies you? Are you kidding me? And so, that's the foolishness of the secular world today.
So just to be clear, you are saying that it is okay to seek wisdom and maybe even accountability from those of the other gender. However, there is wisdom that you must practice, like not meeting one-on-one ever.
Yeah. It's only because so many people have fallen It's not just David. Look at Joseph. Joseph just ran. He found himself in the same room. This is what Potiphar's wife did. She was so slick. She put herself in a position where Joseph would fail 100%. And yet Joseph ran.
He said, nah, I ain't like that, son.
I don't know if that's exactly what he said, but something to that effect. Something to that effect. I ain't like that, son. And then he ran from the room. And then she used it against him and he went to jail for it.
Yeah.
But he feared God more than man. And I think the fear of God should possess you to not do these things. Yeah, that's just wisdom. And I think just because you don't overtly sin, it doesn't mean that you keep on putting yourself in these like very, very dangerous situations. Why do you keep on teetering on the ledge just because you haven't fallen over yet? Isn't it just a matter of time where you fall over if you keep on teetering off ledges? Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that people are like, well, I didn't fall. Was that the point? I was like, yeah, that's the point, because the point is not to sin, right? No, the point is not only not to sin, but it's to hate the sin. It's to put yourself as far away from sin as possible because you want to get to as close to God as possible. That's the point. And I think we miss the point when we think the point isn't only not to sin. Yeah, I think you have missed the point then.
I want to get into some hot water here. Oh, well, I don't want to get into the hot water.
Speaking of hot water, I think we are, as a podcast, we are beyond that.
Scalding.
No, I just don't think, people have come up to me and asked, how have you guys not been canceled yet? Maybe that's a badge we wear, but not really.
Me. I don't really say much, to be honest. I'm kind of a good guy around here. Yeah, I don't really say
I think you
nothing.
get most of the hate, but it's fine.
I don't even say, you know what it is?
People don't even talk to you in certain places outside. You know that's true, right? They don't even say hi to you.
Oh yeah.
And I've introduced you multiple times. Well, let's not hit that sore spot though.
But haters motivate me.
Do they?
Yeah, like this great podcast host from the Just Thinking podcast said, "Let your haters be your motivators." He's coming though.
Is he? I don't know if he's coming
in 2 months.
No, his partner's coming.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the co-hosts is coming.
Yeah, so we got Virgil Omaha Walker.
Yeah. Do you think you'll say that when you think
Omahisi?
Yeah, didn't you say that Sam, didn't you say that you're going to call him Omahisi when you first see him?
No, I never said that. That's crazy. The disrespect.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Sam said that. He's just denying that on the podcast.
I don't know. But, so we're going to get into a little bit of hot water here. Is there such a thing as good friends of the opposite gender? And if we find ourselves confiding mostly to the opposite gender, is that wrong?
I would think that if there seems to be an imbalance in your life, your church members, your family members would point it out, and you should gain the wisdom from that. For me to give you a blanket general statement, yes and no, I think might exclude some exceptions. There obviously are exceptions in the world. And, I think, but for the most part, you want to get wisdom. I think because of that extreme kind of generalization of yes and no, we've gone to the place where, maybe the Amish, we're not the Amish, by the way. I have nothing really against the Amish, but we're not the Amish where the men and women are completely separated all the time. Is it good that they do it? I don't know. I think maybe there's an argument that can be made for that, but I think what they're doing their best and we are doing ours.
Yeah.
And so what's funny about our culture is I've never said men and women sit separately. Never. Not even in youth group. Other pastors may have, but we naturally do that. Even in like dinner settings where maybe 10 of us go to a diner or something, we just kind of separate.
Is that not the case everywhere else? Or is that just a unique thing?
Yeah, it's just a thing that I've noticed in our, But is it because we have an unhealthy view on gender or sexuality? I think
so.
that's what the world would see it as, but
Yeah.
I think it's because we have a healthy view. We do that. Wives tend to sit with wives and husbands sit with husbands. And we talk about husbandly things and wives talk about wifey things, right?
Right.
And so those are natural things, just like it's natural for in a church setting, all the dry cleaner owners sit together and talk about their dry cleaners. All the medical professionals sit together and talk about medical professions. But I enjoy our church that actually all the doctors don't go together and sit and talk. In fact, I don't think the doctors talk to each other in our church. They all have their own separate friend groups. But I would think that's a natural thing, though. It's nothing to say this is evil. How dare doctors come together and sit together? In our church, it just doesn't happen that way, but it can in your church. I don't think that's something to frown upon at all. But in the same way, we just don't want to stay in our own enclaves again. And you want to have that broad accountability that the church provides, that it was meant for. Okay?
So I'm not trying to say can you give an answer? I'm not trying to say that, but I'm just saying, because I think even in the world, even in society as liberal as it is, if you're a guy that only has girlfriends, or if you're a girl that only has guy friends, there's movies about this stuff. Like it's not normal. It's people know that that's not a normal thing.
Well, I mean, most of those movies are coming of age movies. And so
Right.
when you watch the coming of age, it's like a tomboy girl who eventually discovers boys are cute, and then she dates one or something like that. That's what, a lot of us grew up on.
Yeah.
It is about the coming of age or the age of accountability, when you start having a will that, can be judged. That's what age of accountability means.
Yeah.
And so when that happens, we express it in our culture. Every culture has their own expression of it, but there is an age of accountability. There is an age where you start to change. For a lot of times, it's, adolescence to that puberty, to adulthood, right? Manhood or womanhood. But it can be before. And so, we have our own expressions, culturally speaking, to do that. And so I think it's weird if you're past that age of accountability and you still do it. Perhaps there is something that you need to, be challenged with, perhaps.
So if you find yourself confiding mostly to the opposite gender, that is a sign for us to reflect. Is that what you're saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, what are you talking about? What are you confiding into the opposite
I don't know.
gender?
I don't know. It ain't me, but I'm just saying, in general, if someone finds themselves confiding only in the opposite gender, or they feel only because some people might say, "Oh, I only feel comfortable with these guys," or "I only feel comfortable with girls."
Well, that's why there's that the unwiseness or even the foolishness of that position is to say that sexual attraction has nothing to do with the conversations that you have with the opposite sex. I can completely separate these two parts of, I can be completely objective when talking to a man and woman at the same time. That's ridiculousness. No one believes that. I guess you can delude yourself into believing it. That's why we have the A in LGBTQIA, right?
Plus.
Yeah, but the A is asexual. That means I don't have desire or drive. That's there's something wrong with your brain then, because if you ever watched the show House, House figures it out. There's something wrong with him chemically. That's why he's asexual. But if you are a healthy individual, you have to keep that into account. I would say that's just basic wisdom. That's not even high level wisdom. That's just basic level wisdom that we have foregone because of, some kind of objective that you want to achieve in this secular culture.
I'm just curious because I've seen this, I've heard this, and so I wanted to just kind of get your thoughts on that. Moving along with accountability, a lot of times, private information may be shared, for the privacy of the person. When should information in an accountability setting, meeting, partnership, when should that information be shared with elders, I know we've talked about prior, if it's in danger to the other person or to that individual, then it should be shared. But what if it's information that can be harmful to the church? Should you keep it a secret, or do you share it with elders? What if it's gossip? How do we handle the information that is shared? Is it okay for us to, because the whole thing is because, being a snitch is such a looked down upon thing.
Yeah. What if they make you like pinky promise that you won't share it with anyone?
If you're pinky promising at 30 something years old, then that's a separate issue. That's weird. I have not pinky promised another adult after the age of 25.
After the age of 25.
Yeah, 24, I was pinky promised everybody.
And stamping it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. If it's harmful to the church,
But I don't want to be a snitch, though.
it needs to be shared. Well, you can share it without snitching. You could share it. This is going on, and they asked me not to share their personal details, but yada yada yada. You can share that. You can share up to what you believe is good, but if it's a sin, it needs to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
You can't have people running around sinning in the church and it not being disciplined and expect the church to survive, let alone thrive. And so, thrive, let alone survive, is what I meant.
Yeah.
But you definitely want to tell an elder if it's something that's going to affect the church. Come on, that's like.
What if it's like gossip, though?
If it's gossip,
and it's too juicy.
Yeah, I don't know. I would keep gossip to yourself.
Gotcha.
You shut that down when that comes to you.
You say like, no, man, no gossip.
I just yell, shut it down.
You just scream and shut
So
it
if I ever hear at any second,
like,
you just
don't
start
even have to yell it to their face. You could just turn around and shout it to the sky.
But I mean, the reason why I ask this question is because oftentimes, under the guise of accountability, someone will gossip. And I think that's one thing that perhaps our church needs to practice more, is just the shutting down of gossip. So like, if I hear some gossip, it's awkward for me to be like, dude, I think you should stop talking right now. Or like for me to scream, shut it down. Like, how do I stop it in its tracks? Because I think it would just be helpful for us to know even how practically to do that. And because it's awkward, right?
Yeah, I mean, you have to make it awkward sometimes. Sometimes people are way too comfortable and it's not proper. Some people overshare. Some people share too little. Well, you have to use your wisdom. Like I said, you're in a position where you are, a life stage where you are. From the standpoint that you are, you need to have the wisdom to respond well. You don't respond the same way to a 50-year-old than to a 15-year-old. Even if they shared to you the same information, like they said the same gossip, you would share differently. Maybe to the 15-year-old, you might yell, shut it down. But to the 50-year-old, you might want to turn your face and yell, shut it down. But, in all seriousness, I think with the position that you're in, you have to shut it down. It's just a matter of how you want to express it according to the wisdom God has given you. So when someone shared some kind of, something inappropriate with me, I stopped them and then I asked them, what made you think that it was okay to say that to me? And they would immediately apologize, especially if they're part of the church. What makes you think that it's okay to share that kind of stuff with me? And then, is it awkward? Perhaps. But who cares? That's not the point. The point is, I don't want everything to be hunky-dory. Again, the SAT word from last week.
Yeah.
I don't need everything to be hunky-dory all the time. The whole point is, am I being a brother to those that are around me? And that sometimes can mean adversity. That sometimes can mean hunky-doriness. But it doesn't just mean one thing, right? That doesn't make any sense. So when Junseok is having a hard time, my job isn't to always cheer him up. Sometimes it's just to come alongside him and say, I'm praying for you, brother.
Yeah.
And I haven't forgotten what you're going through. And that's all you need. Why do I have to say, Junseok, are you okay? Is there anything that you want to talk about? Do you want to grab dinner sometimes? That's sometimes okay. But why does everybody have to say it? Imagine 150 people went to Junseok and said that. That's weird, right?
It's a lot of dinners, man.
Yeah.
Maybe he would want that. 150 dinners.
I don't have that much hospitality budget.
Why do you have to pay when they're inviting you out? It's like you have a weird dynamic in your relationships. If they invite you out, they're the ones offering to pay.
That's
If
what
they
you would
invite
think.
you out and then you have to pay, that was a weird thing.
Can I say something so off topic? Nah, I'm not gonna say it because people are gonna think, "Oh, you hating." So I'm not gonna say it. But yeah,
You want to say it.
no, I don't want to say it. But
Just say it.
I would like. So you know how you said hunky dory? I feel like someone just made that up. I want to make up a word. My word is jubla jubla. That means
That has nothing to do with anything.
no. That means like, oh, it's chill. Like, oh, it's jubla jubla. Anyway, so the reason why I asked what I asked, what I ask? What did I ask? Oh, how do you differentiate between gossip and someone venting about something? So let's just say someone's like, oh, I can't believe so and so did this. Oh, so and so is doing this to me right now. This is what's happening. Do I scream, shut it down? Or like, how would you distinguish between gossip and just someone venting or someone talking to you about a situation that they're in? Someone maybe even talking bad about somebody. How would you distinguish? And I think one of the most common ways that people talk badly about somebody is with the pretense of, hey, but you know I love them, but let me just share the story of what they did to me or what they're doing right now or why they're being annoying.
Yeah. Oh, it's always the pretext that gives it away. If you have to say, look, I'm not trying to say something bad about this person, or look, I'm not speaking bad about my spouse here, but that's always like that's like a flag.
Yeah.
It might be yellow, it might be red, but it's a flag.
So how do you distinguish
How do I distinguish what?
like between gossip and something else? Because I've heard plenty of people say, hey, this is what's going on.
Oh yeah.
You know-
I don't think we would necessarily tell people's personal business in public spaces. But if it is a public act and you talk about it publicly, then it probably is for the most part okay, unless you're detracting from the person. So you never want to go to ad hominem in any kind of discussion. I think that's something that you probably want to stay away from, But, if you embezzled a ton of money, let's say, for example, and you're in jail, and I go, Sam embezzled a bunch of money. That's why he's in jail. That's not gossip.
No.
But if I go, Sam embezzled a bunch of money, he's in jail, and he's a bleepity bleep, that might be something I probably want to stay away from.
So I guess my question is, let's just pretend, let's just use an example. Maybe that might be more relatable to people in the sense of like what they do. Let's just say me and Chunseok are working together, which we do. And let's just say Chunseok did, you know what? I'll take the hit. I did a poor job at running Reformation Fall Festival. I didn't do,
Reformation Family Fall Festival.
Family Fall Festival. Well, this is an example in an alternate universe. So for them,
it wasn't
it's RFF.
Jubla Jubla.
It was not Jubila at all. So let's just say that I did a poor job doing my job. And then so Chunseok, when he's hanging out with his friends, is like, dude, like Sam didn't even do anything. Like I had to do everything. Like Sam didn't do this. He didn't do this. Like I don't know. Like he's not good at this. Like I don't know why he's doing this. Is that gossip?
No, it's slander. What are you talking about?
Oh, okay.
I mean, gossip is when you share something that was supposed to be intimate, and whether it's true or not, with a group that shouldn't be hearing this stuff. Slander is when you detract from the person's reputation, and it can be completely subjective. Like what you said, he didn't do anything. Well, did he really not do anything? Because is that true or false?
Right.
He did something, but
Right.
he did And I think there's ways to share, which maybe when you share or vent for frustrations, there are ways to share. But now we have I need to share my frustrations on a pure narcissistic level, meaning I did all this and these guys did junk.
Or like I did everything. Did the most work in the team project. No one else did anything. That's slander.
Oh, yeah. If you're detracting from their reputation, I'd probably stay away from them. Stay away from that kind of talk.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, I wouldn't even say things like, Sam, you suck. Something like that. Or even to your face. Why would I say that to other people?
No, I mean, I think this is helpful because, to be honest, this happens a lot. where people say he doesn't do anything, she doesn't do anything. Can you believe what he or she did? And it's all under the pretense of, I'm going to vent. You're my good friend. Let me just vent to you and get this off my chest. But what is it really?
Yeah, because they're afraid of if they don't vent, it's going to find another avenue and make its way out. So I think a more classic example would be where you're with your group of friends and then you vent about your work or your boss. Because there are two different spheres in your life and you can just, without any reservation, talk about whatever you want. And I think for the Christian, you still stay away from that because for the Christian, everybody is either a brother or sister or someone that needs to be proselytized to.
Then should a Christian ever vent about anything?
Yeah, I think there are ways to vent, but venting itself may not be healthy in the way that you're describing it.
Yeah.
It's just like they had those like smash rooms a few years back. It was like a thing.
Yeah.
It was almost a trending thing where you want to vent and you just need a room to smash things. So they gave you a room and you could break a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And people realized, psychologists even said, this actually doesn't help anything. In fact, the more you let loose those or vent those angry dispositions that you have, the more angry you become.
Yeah.
So just because you vent doesn't alleviate anything. In fact, it can make you even more angry. I think for the most part, that's absolutely true. We're called to be peacemakers. So how are you making peace when you are venting? I would say venting in the way that you're describing it would be more of giving into, tendencies that are not helpful, maybe even violence, which is not good at all. And so if you feel like you need to vent, perhaps you need to lay your heart down before the Lord and ask him to change your heart. That would be a good way to vent. You know what I mean? So when you go to your friends, you could say things like, I have these feelings that I know that aren't good, but I feel like I'm being treated unfairly, but I want to, be faithful in the position that I have because being faithful in my workplace is being faithful to God. Can you pray for me? That's a avenue of venting, but it's not giving into sinful dispositions.
But what if we just want to share with somebody what we're struggling with, what we're going through? And this leads to, it opens up into this type of slander. Like, how do we?
Oh, it happens all the time. That's my point. It happens all the time but when you catch yourself, you have to repent. You have to pull yourself back. And that's what I've heard a lot of people do. When people go, you know what? I don't mean any disrespect to my spouse, but he or she is blankety blank. And then after they say that, they're like, oh, I'm sorry I said that.
Yeah.
Please, please just don't remember this part.
Right.
And you're like, yeah, why'd you say that? Don't say stuff like that. And then you're like, okay. And then that could be a lesson. I think for the most part, when people talk about it, I think the reason why I want to give a lot of examples about the spouse is people who talk a lot, who tend to be angry at their spouses the most.
Yeah.
So it's the people that you're closest to that you vent a lot about because they're not perfect and you put on them your ideal, your perfection, right? Which is not necessarily a biblical ideal, or you can't follow through with your biblical idea perfectly. So you put it on the other person. And a lot of people tend to do that. And so you do that to the people that are closest to you. And you just go, I just have high standards. Yeah, sure you do. But if you had the ultimate high standards that God has for you, you would also know that love covers a multitude of sin, multitude of wrong. Where's the covering part? I was like, you don't understand. I cover like 99%. I just say the 1%. Well, I guess the challenge for that person then is to cover the 1%. So you are 100% covering. And so there's always a challenge that we can go through, always a lesson that we can learn from. And I hope that people will take that to heart.
I think this is something that I see a lot, actually. And that's why I wanted to also talk about it and bring it up. Because, I think I've even fallen to something like this where I think, I want to just vent. I want to, even to my wife, like, oh, guess what Chunzak did today? You won't believe what he did this time. Stuff like that.
This time. You talk about me to your wife regularly?
Yeah, I can't really speak to that general random example. I would say, just principally speaking, you never want to detract
Yeah.
You want to edify and encourage. And if you need to admonish, then it could be something like, talk to your wife and say, Junzak did this. It's not good. I'm thinking about doing this and addressing it. What do you think? That might be something you might say, but
Mhm.
it's too general for me to really respond well. But principally speaking, you'd want, you want to apply the golden rule in this part. You want to do to them what you want them to do to you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so how do you want to be addressed when you sin? You don't want them to let you keep sinning, but at the same time, you don't want them to like destroy your reputation. How do you want to carefully handle that? And so you probably want to do it in a similar fashion.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And we are running out of time, but we have a lot more to get through. So we're going to quickly go through our Q&A for this morning.
We need a beat.
What you got in the bag? What you got in the bag?
What you got in the bag?
The question for this morning is concerning, like you said before, the age of accountability, the age of discretion. And I think the question comes from understanding that we see and from the from 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 23, and also the Westminster, I believe is the Catechism or it's the Confessions. But I'll just read 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 23 for us. But now he is dead. Why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he will not return to me. And this is talking about David, who was mourning prior for his son that he had with Bathsheba, the firstborn, and he died. And once he died, he no longer was fasting because he realized that he was already dead. He can't bring him back. He will go to him, but he will not return to me. Some people will say that he's talking about the land of the dead, but most commentators will say that he's talking about heaven, where David will meet him in heaven once more. And when he mourns for Absalom, he does not do this, though. And so they compare the two in saying that he knows that his son that he would have had with, or that he had with Bathsheba, the first one, was in heaven, whereas Absalom was not. And so people take this to understand that babies that die in infancy go to heaven. Whether it's miscarriage or abortion or stillborn or disease, or any other reason, sad reason for why an infant would die in infancy, they go to heaven. But I guess my question is, we know that even babies of believers, that they have inherited the sinful nature and are therefore privy to God's judgment. Is that the right word, privy? So how do we put this two together? In one end, where we see that babies who die in infancy, as the Westminster Divines have also defined it, go to heaven, but then understanding that every single human being, whether they're a baby or not, has the sinful nature and they are responsible for sin and go to hell. So how do we reconcile the two?
Yeah, there's definitely original sin. Everyone's born with it. Because of that, we are destined and bound to hell. Separation from God for eternity. But we also know that it is through the mercy and grace of God that we have been saved, and is faith in Jesus Christ, only faith in Jesus Christ, that's a sign of our election, let's say. And so the Westminster Confession of Faith talks about elect infants. Okay?
Yeah.
And it says, I'm going to quote it. Elect infants dying in infancy are regenerated and saved by Christ through the Spirit, who worketh when and where and how he pleases. So also are all elect persons who are incapable of being outwardly called by the ministry of the word. And so there is an expression that happens when you're saved for the most part, but there is those people that may not be able to express. How do we know that they're elect? We know that they are elect because of God. You know what I mean? So it's God who effectively chooses who gets to be saved.
Yeah.
And just because you make an outward confession of faith doesn't mean you're saved. That's a sign of your faith. Just like baptism, that when we give infant baptism, it doesn't mean that they're saved. It's not through baptism you're saved. You're saved through Jesus Christ and Jesus Christ alone. What we understand, though, in the Presbyterian or the Paedo-Baptistic tradition is that when you are living under someone that is of faith, that is sanctified and justified, and you are under their care, meaning you are not at a place where you can have that will of your own, like a 2-month-old baby, you do receive that holiness. This is what I'm talking about when we talk about 1 Corinthians 7. They are made holy because of you until they can come to a place where they can, do that. What does that mean for us, though? Is that for us to explore the mystery of the, who's called and who's not? No one really knows. So how do we express it in our church? We express it in our church through baptism. We express it in our church with the understanding that when we baptize an infant, because of their believing parent or parents, they have essentially been made members of our church. Our covenant extends to them. That's what it means. And so I get it that the Baptists don't believe that and they take issue with that, but they effectively live that out too. They extend their covenant or the benefits of the covenant to their children too. So they receive children into their church, right? They just don't call them members perhaps, but that's just semantics. They receive the preaching of the word. They receive, care that's given to them. Like what a pastor isn't going to minister to a child because they don't have membership. You know what I mean?
Right.
They do treat them as members. Would they do like their funerals? 100%. Would they say they went to hell or they don't know? No. They'll say, their God has called them. And so I do believe that even a ton of Baptist ministers would, do the same. That's what John Piper had to do this whole thing. Do babies go to heaven when they die? He had to answer that because he doesn't believe in the Westminster Confession of Faith line about elect children. But Presbyterians have no problem with that because there are elect children. And we also understand that it is only through Jesus Christ who saves, but we extend the covenant now and we treat them as such if you are a child of a believer. And we know that there is faith that gets passed down. That's 100% true, but you have to make it your own in the end when you are of culpability, meaning you are in that age of accountability. Then you make it your own. Until then, you have someone overseeing you. You have someone who is responsible for your life. And that's before the age of accountability.
So there is an age of accountability?
To a degree, yes. Yeah, you would absolutely think that in the sense where when someone doesn't have their will. Now, if you're talking about a specific age, then that's not what we're talking about. Because a 6-year-old can profess genuinely the faith. That means that person has that will or capacity to confess and make that faith their own. But until then, we wouldn't necessarily say that this person is accountable. Does that make sense?
So I think oftentimes certain people may talk about the age of accountability in the sense of the age of responsibility, in the sense that at what age do you become responsible for your sins? Meaning at what age, if you were to pass, would you go to hell? Versus prior to that age, you wouldn't. But you don't believe in that.
No. We're saying that you are a sinner from the moment that you're birthed or you're conceived because we are children of Adam until God takes us and makes us, children of Christ, that kind of thing. And so we are now of the second Adam, and that happens by the monergistic, regeneration, right?
Yeah.
And so God can do that. That's what we mean by elect. What gets expressed, though, is something that we can't, what gets expressed isn't something that we know fully. So you don't know if a child has been elect yet or not, but you treat them as such if you are a child of a believer, because we believe what the Bible says, what the text says about children, and what David said about his kid. He said he's going to meet him.
Yeah.
Was his kid not a sinner? You know what I mean?
Right.
But he had faith in God that his baby was under his protection, and his faith gets technically imputed to the kid. That's what we mean by the holiness going to the kid, the sanctification going to the kid. And then you would imagine that, to a 2-3-year-old, they're praying to God and God receives that prayer. That prayer is a prayer that is pleasing to God. When you pray like prayers of thanksgiving for the food,
Yeah.
is God not going to accept it because that person has not been baptized as an adult? I mean, come on. And so there's some obvious things that we understand, but there are things that we don't fully understand. Like, is this kid part of the elect? No one knows for sure. But how do we treat that person? If they are of age, if they are in the age of accountability, then they need to express it with a confession. But if they are not, we look to the person that is of accountability, that has overseeing responsibilities over them. Does that make sense too?
So you would say then that every single Christian baby that has passed due to miscarriage or being stillborn, every single one is in heaven.
I would say that's what I would believe, but it is ultimately up to God.
Right. So you trust in God's election.
Oh yeah, I trust in His
Right.
election, and I trust that when a kid can't do anything, that in His mercy, that I believe what the Bible says about our children inheriting our faith, especially in the Old Testament.
So then, I guess, at what point would they then be responsible?
I think there is an apostasy that happens when you continually reject the faith that you grew up in.
Mm-hmm.
And then you pray for their soul. You pray that they turn from their sin. And that's where you see parents truly heartbroken over children that have left the faith. And that we actually say that they've left the church. They were part of it. That means they were part of the church. To leave something, you wouldn't say they left the church if they were never a part of it.
Right.
There's nothing to leave. And so that's why they're heartbroken, because the most important thing that you want to pass down to your children is the faith. The faith is something that we call an inheritance for a reason. And so there is that element that I think a lot of people miss. And that's unfortunate, because while the faith that you have in Christ is personal and is something that you have to confess, it's also something that you inherited. How can you say anything otherwise? Are you saying that your parents' faith had nothing to do with yours? There's all these elements that we've inherited. And so there is that dual aspect of the faith that we should understand. And for a lot of people in our church, they've inherited that faith from their parents. Just like you, just like me, just like Jansuki. We didn't just decide, God didn't just call out of the darkness out of nowhere. We were introduced to the faith at a very young age. And then we made it our own when we, became able to, right?
Do you want him to give you like an age?
No, I didn't expect that answer, actually. And that's not what I read. So that's why I was asking.
Yeah, no, give the other position.
No, because then what it seems like is, and I know this is not what you're saying, but it almost seems like then confirmation is salvific, in a sense where
Yeah.
if the child comes of age where he or she can profess the faith, that's when they're saved, or that's when they're in in the fold of their own volition.
Yeah. It seems unnaturally cruel, in my personal opinion. And I get it. I'm working backwards here. It seems unnaturally cruel to have someone receive all the benefits of the covenant and not be part of the covenant for all their life when they are not able to reject or receive. They don't have that capacity, meaning like a 2-month-old or
Right.
someone who doesn't have the
Right.
mental capacity. That seems unnecessarily cruel. And I would say from just the natural way that we see things progress, what we see faith in that the believers had, even in the Old Testament, not just the New Testament, that if you are, I think it really has a lot to do with this individualistic age that we live in. Individualism is good, it's great, but it's not the tell-all of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are things that we can learn from the past. And this is a recent phenomenon where all these individualistic ideas have come upon us, where we've translated that even into the faith. That's what I always want to push up against. Faith is something that you have to say on your own accord, but you are being received into the faith of believers. So it's not just the individual. You're not just living alone. I
Right,
wish
right,
people
right.
would get that. And so the biblical position isn't that you become like, saved because of baptism or because of confirmation. The biblical position is that election is solely by God. And if God has elected you, and then we see those expressions manifest either in yourself when you are of age or your parents when you are not of age, we confer that covenant to you physically here in this world.
Mm-hmm.
The power of that, though, it's not just a costume. It's not just some kind of, covering that we put on. There is a deep significance to it, just like it says in Matthew. What you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. When you unbind or loose,
Mm-hmm.
will be loosed in heaven. There is a connection between the earth and the heaven. Because of that faith, we believe that when we confer that, rightfully, of course, when we confer that extension of covenant, we do it in faith, knowing that it has been bound in heaven. And so we don't just do it with crossing our fingers. I hope my kid is saved one day. We believe that my kid is saved. That's why I baptize. And when they come of age, they will be able to profess it on their own. Not I hope that they will profess it. This is where I believe that even Presbyterians have been so affected by that Baptistic tradition that is now, really dominating our discourse in the evangelical world, that we've lost that. And as a Presbyterian, I don't think that's what Presbyterians mostly believe. I believe that Presbyterians sincerely believe that when I baptize my kid, I baptize it because they're saved. Not because that one day maybe they'll make a profession of their own and maybe they'll be saved then. We believe that they're part of the elect. Why? Because God has elected them. Why? Because this is my kid. This is something that I will pass down to my kid. And that's the most important job that I have as a parent, to pass this faith down to my kid. And by the grace of God, this kid will also accept it, just as I've accepted, just as my father accepted it, just as my grandfather accepted it, just as my great-grandfather accepted it. That's what I believe. And so that's why I pass down this faith tradition to my child. And that's why I think it's such a powerful thing to baptize a kid. And there will always be pushback to that because there is that element that we don't know. Well, how do you know that every kid is saved? I don't know. But then why do you do it? I do it in faith. Just as Abraham did it in faith and obedience. He put his covenant to his kid. We put our covenant to our kids. We've gone away from that to think that our kids have nothing to do with our own faith. And that's the pushback I like to give. And I think it's a good pushback that you even give me. Like, are we discounting, original sin by doing this? I think no. Hopefully I gave that response. To that.
Yeah.
And are we saying that confirmation is salvific? Hopefully that answered the question to that too. And I think the deepness of that position is that we want to be able to be faithful in obedience. So the reason why we baptize our child isn't simply for some mystic reason.
Like hopefully.
Yeah, it's in obedience.
Right.
Because we saw that our father, Abraham, did it. And so we do it too, that kind of thing.
So I could imagine someone giving pushback saying, well, there are children of Christians that have strayed and have passed not trusting in Christ. They were infant baptized. They were even confirmed. Then how would we answer that?
Yeah, I mean, look, the institutions of this world are not perfect, but the institutions were still given to us. I bet there's communion that people took when they shouldn't have, and they got judgment put on themselves. Just like I bet there were baptisms that were performed where parents actually did not adhere to the promise that they gave that they would raise their child in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. I bet there are parents that didn't do that, and that's going to be a judgment on you. And then Presbyterians have talked about this. Calvin talked about it, that a worse judgment is upon those, especially those who have grown up in the faith, that had all the benefits of the covenant and then reject it at the end. There is a worse place for you in hell for those that have had, to them conferred the benefits of the covenant and lived in this world with those benefits and then in the end reject them. So that's why I think it's a sadder place. It's a more horrendous, dangerous, horrific place for someone who grew up in the faith to later on go reject it and say they're deconstructing the faith, that's why it irks you more. Whether you believe what I said or not, I'm saying innately it irks you more when someone says that they are deconstructing the faith. That means they grew up with the benefits of the faith.
Right, right,
and they
right.
are now spitting on those benefits.
Right, right, right.
That's worse, in my opinion.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And I'm sure there may be more questions, and please do email us at podcast@cjsnj.org. I almost forgot our email. We have no time, but we have time. Yep, for current events. Today's current event is I want to talk about Osama bin Laden. And he wrote a letter to America.
Literally called A Letter to America.
Yeah, it's literally called A Letter to America. And he's kind of explaining, in his words, obviously, why he's attacking America or why he attacked America. These days, especially with the crisis, the battle, the trouble in the Middle East, I couldn't find the right word.
War.
The war in the Middle East, because of what's going on, this letter has actually resurfaced and this is crazy, millions and millions of hits on TikTok. This is why I even ask, is TikTok even a good thing? And young people are reading this letter. They're encouraging other people to read this letter. And they're saying, wow, my view on American foreign policy is changing. And someone even compared this to deconstructing their faith. And so now people are reading Osama bin Laden's letter to America. Now their view on America is changing. Now their view on foreign policy is changing. And there are millions and millions and millions of people looking at this on TikTok, on X, which used to be Twitter, and social media platforms. And they are being changed from the inside out. So it makes you think, right? And it has to do with accountability, because the whole point is to keep America accountable, right? In doing what they're doing in the Middle East and other areas of the world as well. And this is crazy. How do we think about this? And by the way, in this letter, there are anti-Semitic notions, and there's also anti-LGBTQ notions. And where people aren't saying they support bin Laden or they support terrorism, even though I think there is like a pro-terrorism thing going on right now. Even though they're not saying that they do support terrorism, but they're just saying, we want this insight. We want this other side of the story, because there's always two sides of the story. How do we take this? There's some craziness happening right now. Did you also know that last week in San Francisco at the Golden Gate Bridge, I don't know if it was the Golden Gate, but it was a bridge. Many cars were parked in protest for Palestine. Many cars were parked blocking traffic, and they threw their keys into the bay. So cars had to be towed for this protest to be stopped. So it's some craziness going on right now.
Yeah, I just think it shows the depravity of our world. We don't know from our left and right. Then we're being accused of not knowing from our left and right. So it's just, back and forth accusations, because there's no moral compass to go by, especially if you think you're the right. And so, yeah, in 2002, Osama bin Laden wrote a letter to America in 2002. And then, even then, there were some sympathizers, but we called them crazy. We called them extreme, left-wing crazies who don't understand anything. And we got to, rally and kill this guy. And I believe in 2011, we did. And so we celebrated that. But even then, in 2011, some people didn't celebrate. Some people were like, how dare you? How dare we kill him? Was he really that bad?
Yeah.
I bet the CIA raised him. It wasn't his fault, blah, blah, blah. And so even then, there was always pushback. It's just that now a lot of young people are getting into what had already happened in 2011 and 2002. And that's the whole point of what he tried to do. He tried to, divide America in their loyalties, saying, actually, we're in the moral right. You guys are the oppressors. And they're buying into that, hook, line, sinker, because that's their worldview. And so what did Osama bin Laden want? he said that you can't keep on killing us and expect us not to do it. You can't keep on bombing us and then, you know, cry out, "This is evil" when we bomb you, when you're also doing the bombing. But what did Osama bin Laden want? He wanted Sharia law to be in effect.
Mm.
What does that mean? That means he wants women to never be able to go into the public spaces, not play women's sports, to, you know, make sure that they're covered up like in the full burqas. He wanted, you know, people to be executed if they weren't Muslim. He wanted that to come into effect. And that's what people are celebrating now, whether they realize it or not. It's because it's this whole notion of if you are oppressed, then you have a free pass to do anything you want. Because if you're oppressed, that means the oppressor is completely in the wrong, 100%. There's no gray issue here. It's all black and white. And so that's why people are getting so upset. In my personal opinion, obviously, that's why they're getting upset. But, you know, people are always like, nuance. Well, I mean, if nuance only comes if you know what's clear, first of all. If you don't know what's clear, nuance isn't nuance anymore. You're just blind. It's like what, is it what C.S. Lewis said? If you keep on going and thinking everything is transparent, then you see actually you don't see anything. So if you think you can see through everything, you're actually seeing through nothing. You're not seeing anything at all. Mm. And so that's where we are. We're saying nuance, but where's the clear black and white? The clear black and white is just simply the oppressor must be evil and the oppressed are good. Like that's always the case, which is not true. That's not a standard. That means you don't see anything. The standard has to be some moral standard that you can put into, let's say, for example, 2 tablets of stone. You have to be able to write it out. And let's say 10 of them. So write out 10 of your laws in 2 tablets of stone and tell me what they are. And are they moral standards that will stand the test of time, that will stand against scrutiny? And if they're not, you can't do it, then maybe you don't have a good moral standard. And so I think that's what's going on too. The fact that our young people are saying this and this is blowing their minds, I doubt it. I think they're all fugazis. I think they were always against America from the get-go. And this is just, this is what they want to do to stoke a flame and get more people riled up and to, perhaps win some over to their side.
Yeah.
But these TikTokers were not like patriots. They weren't like people who loved America in the first place. They
looking
were
for a
people.
reason.
Yeah, they didn't like America. They were always suspicious. They didn't like the American government, and this is just another thing that they can use to say, "Look, Osama was right all along. America is evil." And then we need to dismantle the patriarchy or democracy or whatever, upturn democracy. And so it's pretty infuriating to those that understand that our young people are easily influenced by stuff like this. And that's what TikTok actually targets. They target really young people because young people are like sponges. They'll soak up this information. And these influencers are called influencers because they influence our young kids. Mm. And so I think that's what the upsetting part is. These TikTokers are all fugazis. They're all liars. They're all putting up a front like, "Oh, I can't believe this is there. I was once a full-on patriot." Yeah, I don't think so. You're all liars. But you do manage to convince our young children. That's for sure.
Yeah.
And TikTok has come out and said they're trying to stop this from trending, or they took it off from trending.
They took it off their search.
Yeah, which is,
you can still search Bin Laden and other things.
That's all. It's all garbage too. TikTok is a Chinese-owned company that has it for America, so they don't have our best interests in mind. How about that? Mm. And so they said in a public statement that it's not as trending as you think. You're overblowing it. It's only a few million people, which is kind of very small for TikTok. That's not true either. What's been shared by a video, the original video was a few million hits, but what was shared afterwards were over like 20 million and it's rising. And so they're also lying. I don't believe them. I don't think you should either. We just go by statistics then. Go by the raw numbers. It's over, multiple dozen millions of viewers that are seeing this and that are being shared with other accounts, and millions upon millions are watching this from other accounts. It's just reinforcing their, their view that America is bad.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I think that's helpful, especially for those of us that may be more inclined to be quick-witted with the current events. I
Yeah, and
think,
if you're a
this is
Christian,
helpful.
I think one of the things that we've been called to do is pray for our country. If you really believe this stuff, how are you praying for the country? I think you pray for the demise of the country instead of the revival of the country. And if you truly do believe that, you want to pray for the revival of the country, how will you pray? You will pray that the gospel will be not only proclaimed, but it will be received by the vast majority of the people in our country.
Mm.
And hopefully that is your prayer no matter what. And if you do pray for that, then actually I find it I would be hard pressed to believe that you could share something like that on TikTok where you're like, a letter to America is good. When the dude is promoting Sharia law, he is completely anti-Christian. How are you saying he was right in, all that he said, and it completely like blew the cover off of what you thought you grew up with? That's such a lie. I'm gonna call out lie on this one. Pinocchio. 4 Pinocchios on this one.
Pinocchio. Clown. Would you say that?
Pinocchio was not a clown.
You're right.
A liar.
There was a meme that I saw that said, how bad would you feel if Pinocchio was grilling you and flaming you and his nose never grew? Thank you, Pastor Gene. And we thank you for listening to this episode of the Dear Church Podcast. Join us next week as we discuss gentleness and patience. And you may know where we're going with this one.
Where are we going?
Home.
I don't even know.
Homeward Bound. Dang, we should make like a podcast called Homeward Bound. That's a good one, huh? Get it? Capital H. I'm really symbolic like that.
Let's do lowercase h.
No, that's rough. I'm
Because
symbolic.
you wanted them to listen to it on their way home. It's afternoon podcast.
Do we need to double H it? Tune in next week to find out. We hope and pray that this has been a blessing in your ears. Fight the good fight, finish the race, keep the faith. Peace.